how are you guys sort of adapting to the commercial real estate market with WeWork having just had its difficulties?
I'm a city planner by training. So like I've always been very obsessed with underutilized spaces. So the way Codi works is that we are a managed marketplace where on one hand we have landlords with vacant spaces. And then on the other hand, we have tenants or clients who want companies who want flexibility, ease, and speed as it comes to their office space. So they kind of like want to outsource that process of finding, setting up, and then managing the space, but also outgrowing, which is a really big pain point for companies and specifically startups, their office space. How are we different from co-working? We're not co-working. Like we don't offer co-working spaces. We only offer private, dedicated office space. So we're really more competing, if you want, with like the traditional brokerage or traditional office leasing. We typically get a lot of companies when they're ready to graduate from the WeWork stage or like the co-working stage. Once they hit 5-10 people, it becomes kind of expensive for this little box that you're in. A struggle in terms of like privacy and like fighting for phone booth and conference rooms. And they're ready to just like really invest in their culture. So then they want to have their own space. And right now, like having your own space is not flexible. You're going to have still brokers and landlords pitching you 3 to 5 year leases minimum. It's a huge hassle. Like it takes 6 months of search and negotiation that are mostly offline. It's super archaic. And then even after signing or maybe or 15, 30-page lease with a landlord that's like landlord friendly, not tenant friendly, you still need to like purchase furniture, set it up, like set up the coffee, the cleaning, all these things. And that typically falls on the co-founder CEO when it's a young company. And then it falls on like somebody else's job that is doing something else with their like, time at a company. And they also wear the hat of office management. So is this just massive, nightmare I think for no reason. And especially right now, that office space is becoming more of a service than it's a big asset on your balance sheet and this massive expense and everyone has to do it. It's like it was a status. It's no longer a status. It's a way to bring your people together. And so we want to make it as easy and streamlined as possible. And basically, disrupting that archaic long-term lease model and reinventing commercial real estate for the way companies work today.
Basically, all major American cities who have had some form of, large amount of office space are sort of struggling with that situation right now. They're losing a lot of, there a lot of leases and all that. So as a city planner, how would you change things to make things better for cities like San Francisco or New York or Austin even that are struggling in this area? What needs to be done to change it?
I think it's really about making it a lot more tenant friendly to like have access to space and just adapting this very archaic process and leasing model to the way companies work today. And today companies, they want ease, speed, and flexibility. They do not want a 3 to 5 year lease. They do not want to commute to the office 9 to 5 every day. That's gone. That's ancient. That's the history, the past. And they do not want to manage the space themselves. And that's what made co-working so successful, right? And the first innovation in real estate, because it's all taken care of for you. So we want to bring that to commercial real estate as a whole and not just like co-working spaces, but like when you want your own space, you're able to do that easily. And like our platform match the company with landlords who are open to like shorter term leases, basically, or shorter terms in general. And we come in and I kind of like add our concierge style services to handle the end-to-end process for the client. I think just having more and more landlords open to this will make them see, and we have data that proves this, there's a lot of demand for that. There's no more demand or very little for like the 9 to 5 office log with a 10-year lease. And that's just that massive gap between what companies want and what landlords are still offering.
Do you think that is the direction that most office leasing situations in most major cities are going to start to have to do more of? How long will it take to sort of transition to a point where companies, or not companies, but cities are more comfortable with such a short, 3 to 5 year lease is now being looked at as a long time. Maybe once upon a time that looked like not so long at all, but things are changing. So how long is it going to take for cities to sort of mentally get used to that?
We're still a capitalist country, right? So like, is there an incentive for landlords to take a shorter-term lease, which will bring life back to those spaces and will help the city as a whole and downtown as a whole, like revive, we live again. Today there's none, because the landlords, a lot of them are still very convinced that things will go back to normal and they will have a 10-year lease at some point. And so they rather wait until they have that big contract coming in. So I think it's like, I'm not in politics, but I'm assuming there may be some tools to help incentivize landlords and brokerages to like open up their spaces to a shorter term duration and leases. I mean, today we almost talking about banks taking back buildings. So we already have, the supply side, like landlords and brokers, like back against the wall almost. And so you can also flip that and then be like, how can we incentivize companies to take space, right? So even if you have landlord opening the space for 6 months, 12 months, then how can they make the space stand out so that like it is also easy for a company to take, because the legal agreement is still very outdated. And again, like there's not management as part of the space. And so I think any space that offers management will have an edge and it will take the demand that is there. I think there are tax components to this. If you are, taking office space in San Francisco, you're paying taxes compared to leaving your employees at home. So we did lose some clients because of that, because they were like, oh my gosh, like the taxes are so big if we take an office space that we'll rather just stay at home. And that's not what the city wants, So I think it's just like also maybe thinking through those tax incentives to like help businesses take back some spaces.
Do you think, obviously this is one that gets thrown out there a lot, a larger amount of residential in downtown cores, that kind of thing. Can that help? And to what extent, is there sort of a point where that doesn't really help too much? Or what would you say about that at all?
I mean, I think that has wonderful side effects. And I've always been for, I'm European and French. So like I've always been for mixed use neighborhoods where you have a mix of like commercial and residential. The benefit is like, well, for those who live there, the commute time to the office is much shorter, right? So like you could assume there's a higher likelihood that people will take space in that neighborhood. The second is just demand for office space as a whole has shrunk. That's just a fact. And so there will be a percentage of our current office supply that will never really be used. And I think that specifically affecting really large floor plans, like the really large spaces they have 10,000 square feet or more that could used to host 200, 300 employees. Who has 200, 300 employees to work in the space every day? Even Twitter or X now has like gave up on that lease. Like, so even if those companies like do not want that type of space, like who want it? Like very few companies. And so those spaces, like if there's a way to rezone them, to redevelop them into residential, 100%. Now there are rules around residential spaces with like windows and ventilation and things like that. So like, I'm not sure how feasible it is for that amount of supply, but I think there's been a lot of progress being made recently.
What have you not had a chance to say yet about your company, Codi, that you would like to make sure you got across?
So one thing I didn't say is that we also have a very unique product that no one else has on the market yet, is like hybrid HQ, where you can have your own office space, but 2 days a week. And so Monday, Tuesday, this is your dedicated HQ. No one else is there. You have your team, but you're paying prorated rent. And then Wednesday, Friday, it's a different company's HQ. And I think that's the future, because the facts are very clear. Employees go to the office 30% of the time, like 2 to 3 days a day or a week. So why would companies ever commit to a full-time lease? That's also one issue, right? But today, landlords don't really have access to those tenants who want to spend money, but like only want 2 days a week. And so want to pay a prorated portion, wouldn't want to commit for the whole space. And so we aggregate that demand and like we try to match them with the right supply and, kind of like a housemate situation. It's kind of a timeshare office model. And I'm very excited for that because I do think that's the future and it aligns with hybrid work where the way companies work today.
What other issues around sort of urban planning or office space? Is there anything else that you feel like you didn't get a chance to mention?
You asked me about WeWork and I didn't really answer. We differentiate in the sense of like we don't do co-working. WeWork has been that first, innovation in real estate, like during the concept of co-working. There's been more co-working spaces before WeWork, but the first one to really make it big and trendy and sexy and but it has a flawed business model. And I think everyone knows that. And we've known that for a while. And so I wouldn't be surprised that they file for bankruptcy the next 6 months. And I think it's actually a huge opportunity for all the other companies trying to innovate in that space, including us, because we don't want to follow that path, because that was like the 2010 business model where those companies like Knotel, WeWork, Breather, they were all committed to like 10, 20-year leases, taking all the risk, and then innovating on the demand side, offering a great product demand-wise for companies, but not changing the status quo with landlords, still giving them everything, basically. And, it backfires and too much risk can kill a company. What we're excited to do is to have more of a partnership with landlords and really act more as a marketplace where we don't take more risk than what the client is committed. And it needs to be, now it's like the right market to have a win-win where all parties can benefit of making that partnership happen. And when you're fighting against a WeWork that has a very unviable business model, it's tough because they're giving their space almost for free. And you're there trying to build like a viable business model, but space is not free. And, so that's like the only thing I would say about like, how that impacts other players, like the WeWork story. I think they impacted the competitors pretty negatively. But once they will be gone, it will be a new era for like, they proved there's massive demand for flexibility and ease of access to office space. I think they were onto something, but just the business model was flawed and there was no innovation on the landlord side. And I'm excited to innovate on that front.
It definitely sounds like the days of the landlords getting their giant long leases are over. It's at least in the big, more innovative cities.
I want to say as well, like we are excited to work with landlords, and I do think it's valuable for them not to sign a 10-year lease. Like they've been burned by these leases, and I do think short term does not only benefit tenants but also landlords because it's very low risk for them. They can also readjust the rent at every turn instead of waiting 10 years and see where the market is at, and so I do think it's a win-win. It's definitely a shock for that part of the industry, but I do think they will see the value and they already seeing it.